like it.
Yeah, right on. Well, cool, man. Well, it's great to meet you. I'd love to begin our conversation before we get into your life and your work by asking you, April 4 years ago, the pandemic was gaining traction. How did you survive the pandemic and how did it change you?
Yeah, so I survived the pandemic through, which is ironic enough, through health and fitness. I took it as an opportunity to really dial in on the things that the world was kind of separating themselves from, kind of distracting themselves by TV channels, all of these things. And I decided to really hone in on mindfulness and embody my highest power. And so I really relied on going outside, going hiking, going into the gym outside. I have an outdoors gym, so that gym wasn't actually shut down. And really, I just used the time to kind of level up my life. And as I was kind of going through that whole process, I saw that there were a lot of people that were struggling in that area and decided to use the digital world to kind of help them level up as well.
You know what's weird about all of it though is I remember at one point I cut my finger really bad, like late March, and I had to go to the hospital. My wife was worried. I'm like, this is the safest time for me to go to a hospital. And I got an ER doc that was kind of hardcore, and he was going to Machu Picchu. He was going to climb the big mountain, the big summit,
Yep.
and he couldn't do it. But I was like, just lay me straight on this. What's going on? Because this was in the early goes, and he was like, anybody that's really in bad health or that's elderly, this is what the disease is going to ravage. But everybody else that's healthier and a better place. So my point of saying that is that you would have figured at that point of everybody's life. I know it was difficult, that would have been the time to start kind of getting to a better place physically and mentally.
100%. I think we are constantly surrounded by distraction in this world. It's a lot easier having the other side of the coin be the digital world being the distraction pillar. So if we're filling our minds with things that are kind of making us scared versus things that are improving our mental health and improving our bodies, it can go one of two ways, right? We can either get stuck in that cycle of terror or we can kind of go on this trajectory of personal development. And I'm going to be straightforward with you. I started that journey in the trajectory of fear and not knowing what I was going to do. And I quickly realized that the backbone of my whole lifestyle came from fitness and health. And so as I really started to hone in on those things that elevated me in that category, it really opened my eyes to not viewing things as a negative, but viewing things as an opportunity to hone in on a few skills. But again, it all boils down to what we're feeding our brains every single day. And it's a lot easier this day and age to fill our brains with negativity because that is what the media outlets like to kind of feed us because it's interesting, right? And they didn't necessarily feed us the things that we could be doing to better ourselves in that time. And so I used social media, the digital world as a platform to express how we can really level up in that time period rather than fall down.
Yeah. Well, in the media, when it bleeds, it leads. That's all there is to it.
100%.
And especially during the pandemic, I remember there had to be a part of these news organizations that capitalized on all of that because they made a lot of money. People were tuning in ways they never did before. So
Yeah, 100%.
wow, it's wild. So let's get to the heart and soul of what you do on a daily basis here in 2024. I'm going to put you in front of a bunch of third graders. It's career day. And one of the kids says, "Hey, what do you do for a living?" How do you answer that child?
I teach you how to be the boss of your life. I teach you how to level up in both your personal life and also your professional life. In doing so, we have alignment within our mind and our body. A lot of the times, we don't necessarily know what that means. And really, what it means is just finding happiness. And what I always say finding happiness means is happiness is a verb. And so we have to do things on a daily basis in order to actually reach that every single day. And in order to do that, we have to hold what's called little promises to ourselves. And when we wake up in the morning, we always tell ourselves, okay, I'm going to do this, or I'm going to do that, or I'm going to do this. And in order to be the boss of our life, we just have to hold those little promises. And that's where I come into play. I teach you how to hold those little promises to yourself every single day through finding that mind and body alignment.
The one thing I noticed with me when I hit points where I needed to change things, it was all about that 90-day habit. You know what I'm saying? When
Yep.
you hit that point where it's just a part of what you do, is that kind of a backbone, a cornerstone of some of what you're going after with people that adopt healthy habits?
Yeah, 100%. It's funny. Right now, I'm going through, I don't know if you've heard of this challenge, but it's called the 75 Hard Challenge. It's through Andy Frisella. He's the owner of First Form Nutrition. Basically, the whole program is structured around holding those little promises to yourself within your workouts and your nutrition. And obviously, what comes with that is the chaos of the world
Yeah.
likes to come in here and there and pull you away from those little promises because it's easy. But the more we kind of understand that we don't have to listen to that little voice in the back of our mind that's pulling us to the comfort zone, but it's really pushing us to that higher version of ourselves, we can start to get better. But when I really break it down for all of my clients and myself, the reality is our mind can only wrap our heads around two habits at a time. And after about 60 days is really where that habit is fully formed. So a lot of the times people will come in and, if you want to change a lot of things in your life, there may be 10 things that you have to change. But if we focus on all 10 things at once, it's very, very overwhelming. So I like to reverse engineer that and say, okay, what are two things that we can focus on for the next 60 days, whether it's your movement or maybe your nutrition? And then after we figure out those two things, then we can add on top. And the whole point of this is sustainable growth, right? The whole goal is to have a lifelong happiness, sustainable approach. And if we focus on all the things that we have to change at one time, it's just so overwhelming. And again, with the whole digital world, we can go online and look up, how do I lose weight or how do I be happy? Thousands and thousands of results are going to pop up. So we just start throwing darts at a dartboard, hoping something sticks. And it's never long before we either find ourselves back at the same weight or even heavier or even more depressed. And so we just have to start with two things at a time. And then after that 60 days is up, then we move on to the next two things. And that stuff compounds over time. And after a
Absolutely.
year of doing that, you kind of have some clarity in where we're going.
100%. What did you want to be in the third grade? What was your dream to grow up and become?
I wanted to be a professional football player in third grade.
Okay. All right. Well, I tell you what, it's good times living in Kansas City now. I just can't believe we got a dynasty. When I was a kid, I grew up in a little town north of here, Liberty, and I'd go see
Yeah.
all those guys at the training camp. And I played basketball and got to know them, and no one really came. But those were the dark days of the Chiefs. It was really, really bad. So anyway, I'm still in shock. So what's your team? Who do you root for?
The Denver Broncos got to go with the D Broncos. Being in Austin though, I do see a lot of Dallas Cowboy fans, so it's always a battle when I run into a Cowboys fan here. But I got to stay strict with my Denver Broncos.
Right on, right on. Well, I think things are going to be better. I think, unfortunately, Russell will be one of the biggest flops in the history of sport.
That is crazy, isn't it?
I mean, I never was sold that he was this phenom, but come on, like at least But that was the weird thing. At the end, he was starting to get shades of what you guys got him for, and then it was like nighty night. Like Peyton couldn't take it anymore. He was like, "I'm out."
I get it, man. I think that we had this idea of him coming in and being a leader of the team, which I think everybody thought. And as the, season started to play out and, he got older and more seasoned with the team, it really didn't start to get more clear on that vision. So it kind of makes sense what Peyton did there.
There's a timeline, man. Like you got to say it's over with at the end and move on from there. But I think people in Pittsburgh are not happy. I mean, that's a
No,
football town. No,
I'd
no.
imagine.
Yeah. So let me ask you this. In your life, who's been a hero for you? Who's been kind of an inspiration for you to become who you are?
I would say my grandfather has been my biggest inspiration. Growing up, I had a little bit of a shaky upbringing. He was always a stable foundation in my life, somebody that I could really resort to in terms of wisdom and advice. And my grandfather always had just a kind and pure heart. And as I've gotten older in my life, I've really recognized that the more we can opt out of the frequency of love and kindness, the more doors open and the higher frequency you're really operating in. And I think that that is one of the things that I think of constantly every single day. And that's a human being that really opened my eyes to what that meant.
So take me back to your childhood. What were some of these seeds that ultimately grew into you now to be a coach? Because you don't have a job. You're helping other people and you're helping them in the highest possible way to get to a mental and physical place that's ideal, that's dreamy. How'd that happen?
Yeah, so I was really raised in the shadows of addiction. anxiety, depression, and the absence of my biological father. And in my early years, it was really marked by some struggle. Acceptance was kind of a foreign concept for me, being replaced, and all of these battles that you kind of go through as a child, not really understanding the world and why things happen. I understood that there was hope in that moment because I was constantly in sports. And so when you asked me the question, what did I want to be when I was in, let's say, third grade? It was always a professional athlete. Maybe it was a professional football player one week. Maybe it was a professional baseball player the next week. But what I started to realize was as I grew into a team environment, those people, those coaches now took on the role of a father figure, for example. And as I started to gain clarity in all of these things through the element of sport, I understood that there was more opportunity in there and I had more acceptance within myself through the achievement of sports. Now, this kind of led me down a dark path after I left college athletics. I was a wrestler in college. So all of that sport led me to college wrestling. And then after that was done, I recognized something within my soul that I categorized myself as the sport. So my identity was wrapped around the sport. And when that was kind of taken away from me, and I realized that professional sports wasn't in my future, I didn't really know what I was going to do with myself. So I transitioned from the world of collegiate wrestling into corporate America. And it was like an experience of a lot of self discovery, I would say. And the absence of a father figure left a void that kind of threatened to consume me in a way that I really didn't really understand because I was constantly distracted by sports growing up. So naturally, I sought peace and unhealthy coping mechanisms, and it was influenced by drugs and alcohol, and just found myself teetering on the brink of self destruction, is what I like to say. So I was grappling with my identity and who I was becoming. And there was one day I was sitting in my corporate office and I was like, I am not fired up like I know I should be fired up. What is something that really fires me up to go and impact this world? Because I know that that's my mission. And when I really got down to it, it was helping people. And so when I started to ask myself certain questions and leading with a little bit of curiosity with what fulfilled me, I understood that for one, I had a business mindset. I was an entrepreneur from the age of 13, always constantly starting to make new businesses and starting side hustles and all this. So I had a little bit of a business foundation. And I realized that the world I live in is the digital world, and I can impact people from just hopping online and just talking about what my story is. And so that is really what started my journey and understanding that I can go and make contact with people all over the world and just tell my story. And through my story, they will latch on to me. And that ended up being the biggest propeller to my growth, which then just propelled me into becoming a coach. And then I hired my first business mentor, and he was like, "Man, who do you really want to help?" And I started to think about that. And I was like, well, who did I want to be as a third grader? I wanted to be a professional athlete. Well, who are the professional athletes of this world? These are the high performers, the CEOs, the executives, these large, large companies. And as I started to think about the characteristics these people had, it made sense in order to go and start talking with those people and kind of seeing how they managed their days and some of the demons and stressors that they took on every single day. And that's kind of what led me down the direction and path of optimizing the mind and body for high level executives.
So of all the people out there today that inspire you or that you find fascinating, who would you love to meet and talk to?
Jordan Peterson, if you know
Okay.
who that is.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
He knows how to articulate his words in such a way that I think is super valuable. One of the things he always preaches on is if you don't know how to articulate your message, you don't know what your message is. And so that is one thing that constantly sticks with myself. The more before I open my mouth, I'm constantly thinking, okay, how do I want these words to be expressed to the people that I'm talking to? And so Jordan Peterson, I'm actually going to see him in person. He's on tour here in Austin at the end of this month. So I'm super excited for that.
Cool. Well, then it may happen. Yeah, you may have the moment.
Good.
Yeah. So let me ask you this, as a sports fan and more specifically football, if you could get into a time machine and go back in time and see one game, one moment, where are you going?
Ooh, I would say when the Denver Broncos were in the Super Bowl with John Elway as the quarterback, John Elway was always my, I would say, role model, but not role model. Just role model because he was a great athlete. The running back was Terrell Davis. That combined duo was a freaking crazy thing to watch. I've watched tapes about that. I would say in the Super Bowl of, I want to say, 96. That would be a really cool game to watch. I think mainly because my stepdad always talked to me about what that game was like and the energy and the atmosphere.
Yeah.
And I think with sporting events in general, even if it's not a Super Bowl game, just being in an atmosphere where people are so passionate about their teams and it's toe to toe and it's a high intense game, I think that fires me up.
That's the whole reason why we get into sports. That's the pageantry. Um, I remember going to there's an indoor soccer team here in Kansas City called the Kansas City Comets, and we love
Okay.
going to it. And they played the night before the Super Bowl this year. And the electricity, they played a Chiefs song. It was just going crazy. So when you can have that pageantry of just getting people in that same zone, there's nothing like it, man. It's really cool. Um, so let me ask you this. What is your motivation every day to wake up to not only help people, but to also evolve yourself as a human? What's that gas in your tank, so to speak?
That's a beautiful question. So one thing I always preach to all of my clients and my community is congruency. So congruency is very, very powerful. When you say who you are, people see that. When you aren't, people see that too. And so the problem is sometimes your ego can look out for your feelings because it sees the parts of you that need to change to become better. When this happens, we tell ourselves that we're good as is, but when your ego protects your feelings, ironically, it ruins your image because incongruence and leadership cannot coexist. And so you can't fully take care of others while not taking care of yourself. You can't really expect more from others when you can't expect more from yourself. So that's why I think the best leaders are brutally honest with self assessment. And that is what wakes me up in the morning. How can I be alignment with what my words are saying and have those followed by my actions? And so being a leader in multiple communities, having that congruency within my actions and my word allows me to really wake up and do the things I'm supposed to do every single day.
What's been one of your favorite client success stories?
So I had a sedentary client that she had not worked out in about 10 years. She was an executive at Amazon and she was about 285 pounds and 5'6". And she couldn't move well. And she came to me and I worked with her for about 6 months. And she said, John, I know I need to be better for my health. My husband just passed away. I'm in this downfall right now. My kids are looking up to me as a role model and I can't feel like I'm being that role model that I really need to be. And so with all of my clients, I always say that I meet you where you're at. If I just give you a cookie cutter workout and diet to follow, that's not going to be sustainable. So like I was saying before, kind of have to reverse engineer this process and say, okay, where are you at currently right now? Let's call that point A. And how do we get to that point B? And that point B was so unseen for her in her vision that she didn't even know where to start. So I said, okay, for the first week, all we're going to do is we're going to go on one 10-minute walk outside. And she said, okay. So the goal for the week was one 10-minute walk. We got the 10-minute walk done after that first week we met. And she said, John, I don't know if I can do this again this week. And I said, Allison, you proved to yourself last week you could do that 10-minute walk. So what's holding you back from doing it one more time? And those weeks turned into months. And by the end of that 6 month period, she was doing 7 walks a day or 7 walks in a week, 1 walk a day. And she had lost over about 50 pounds just by starting with one step. And so I really like to translate that message to people that don't know where they need to start. And it's really just starting with that one step physically or metaphorically, right? And what that one step looks like could be just a step of understanding where we're currently at. If we
Yeah.
don't know where to go, we just have to look in the mirror and say, okay, where are we right now? And what can I do tomorrow? That one step means. And by the end of that 6 months, she had her children going on her walks with her. She had her children in the kitchen that were cooking those good fresh meals that she wasn't ordering from McDonald's or Wendy's anymore. And so she slowly started to then educate her children in the process of what living an active and healthy lifestyle was. And I think that that is one of the biggest success stories for myself because it's all about closeness in relationships and showing up in the world for your kids, respecting yourself, and having the ability to then show up in your work or lead a team because getting fit is deeper than a look. It's really just about embodying this holistic strength. And if we can't really make that one step, then it's not going to be sustainable. So that's probably one success story that I always love to preach about.
So you have to dole out good advice to clients. What's the best advice you've ever gotten?
Be comfortable with your own thoughts. And what that means to me, and it can mean a lot of things to a lot of different people, but for myself, it means that I have to take 10 minutes in the morning after I wake up and just sit with my thoughts. A lot of the times when we have anxiety and stresses and chaos of the world coming in, and we like to distract them with social media or media outlets or work and all of this stuff, and we're not actually acknowledging those thoughts, then we're never going to be comfortable with them. And we have to be comfortable with those thoughts and in order to actually show up for the world the way we want to. So I would say that's one piece of advice that I stick with myself every single day.
So of all of the things that you've done and achieved and evolved into, what are you the proudest of?
I would say pulling myself out of addiction when I got out of college. After I was having that identity crisis, I was looking in the mirror and I didn't really want to be alive anymore. And in that moment, I knew that this could go one of two ways. I could keep living the same way and ultimately not be here anymore, or I can take that one step and getting therapy and showing up into the gym and eating the right things and all of those other aspects, I can do that, which led me to this point. So I would say that's my biggest feat.
So at the end of the day, everyone has a perception of you, family, friends, clients, but you run the show. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
One word, I would say disciplined. There's one person that I always look up to, and that's Jocko Willink. And he says, discipline equals freedom. If we don't have discipline, then we can't open our minds to what we truly can be. And as a man of faith, I think that God always shoots me messages saying, here's an opportunity, here's a door that can lead you to the highest version of yourself. But it's not going to just happen and fall in your lap. You have to be disciplined in what those actions that you tell yourself you're going to do every single day and actually follow through on those things. So I would say my family, my close friends would describe me as disciplined.
So if anyone wants to hire you, learn more about you, reach out any of the good business, where do they go?
At only John Daniel on Instagram.
Right on. That's right to the point, man. John Daniel, thank you, sir. I appreciate it. Best of luck with everything.
Thanks, Joe. I appreciate you.
You bet. Enjoy the eclipse, man.
You as well, man.